Okay, good morning everyone. Morning. Welcome to Laos and Cambodia. Can everyone hear me at the back okay? Yeah, okay. Oh, just got a few more coming in. Okay, good morning again. My name is Jane Sedgwick and I work for HF Holidays and I'm the worldwide product manager, and last October I went out to do the inspection trip or the recce trip for our Laos and Cambodia tour. So for the next 30 minutes or so I'm going to be talking about our trip that is now on sale and available to book. HF Holidays, if you've not heard of us before, we are one of the UK's best walking holiday companies, and we've been around for over 100 years. We were founded in 1913. So I'll talk you through first off where the tour actually goes to and from. It starts right in the north of Laos. Where am I? Up here. Hang on. Right at the top in the north. And then we fly into Luang Prabang, which is just off the map. We then come down and basically follow the line of the River Mekong right down here. We have an internal flight down to Pak Se. We spend a few days here, and then we come further south to this region here before we then go to Phnom Penh, the capital, and then we finish at Siem Reap, which is home to Angkor Wat. The tour itself is 15 nights full board, except one lunch and 5 dinners. We have local guides and we also send an HF leader as well. There's lots of different modes of transport on the tour. We have internal flights, we have lots of boat rides because the focus of the trip is pretty much the Mekong, coach and minibus. We have scooter rides as well, jeeps and tuk-tuks. For those of you who haven't travelled in Southeast Asia previously, the driving can be a little haphazard. You get the sensation that you're a bit scared to start with, but the drivers are really safe and they know what they're doing. Our price for the trip is, including flights, £3,219. If you want to make your own way out there, it's £2,479 without flight. So on the first day when we arrive in Luang Prabang, we are greeted to the country by a local shaman or a holy man who actually takes us into a local home, and you can see on the screen there that his family members are tying pieces of string around our wrists, and this is to actually encourage all the good spirits to come into our bodies and actually bless us for our onward journey. And this is something that the people in Laos actually do as for anything that's important to them, like a birth of a new baby, a new job, a marriage, and also for somebody going on an important journey. So this was us being greeted at the start of the holiday. We also then had a meal with the local family, and the meal service is quite interesting because they actually bring everything out at once. So you don't get your starters, you don't get your main course and dessert as we would here. They actually bring it all out together, so you are encouraged to actually eat what is brought out in front of you all at the same time. And you actually share it with the people sitting around the table with you. You'll have opportunity to go to the night market, which is where all the actual people for the local hill tribes people come down into the local villages and into Luang Prabang, and they actually have displays of their crafts and arts, and there's also opportunity to sample food, street food as well. Excuse me, I seem to have lost my notes off the... I've lost my notes off the screen. Sorry, slight technical hitch.
most recent update?
Yeah. That's okay. Sorry. Okay, so Luang Prabang, we start off there, and after we've had our welcome to country ceremony, we then get up early the next morning and we have our alms giving ceremony where we're encouraged to take part in giving alms to the monks. Luang Prabang is a mix of Buddhist, French colonial architecture and beautiful temples. We got up at 5 o'clock in the morning for this particular occasion, and it was quite an inspiring thing to witness. There were 250 monks who walk around the town, and they belong to 6 different monasteries. Now, being a Buddhist in Laos is very similar to our national service used to be. It was actually something that is compulsory, and because the people are so poor in Laos, they actually send their sons to the local monastery for a period of time. It could be anything from about 3 months up to about 5 years, and some of them actually choose to stay in the monastery as well because they can't afford to pay for their food. So this is their only chance of actually getting food to eat during the course of the day. So we were there actually giving alms. We had a bowl full of sticky rice. So as the monks were walking past us, we were actually getting a clump of sticky rice and handing out to the monks as they were walking past. And you can see that some of the monks are actually very young, and we saw some who were quite old as well, going up into their 70s. During the few days in Luang Prabang, you've got a variety of different excursions, a tour around Luang Prabang itself. There's also a boat ride along one of the tributaries of the Mekong to Pak U, which is where there are some caves, and it sits at the confluence of the Mekong and the Nam U River. And in the cave there are 4,000 Buddha statues. The main purpose of us doing the trip to Laos, Cambodia is to do some walks in the local area. We are a walking holiday company, but also it's to be immersed in the local culture as well. This was a shot that was taken from Fuzi Hill, which is the local hill in Luang Prabang, and we walked up there for the most beautiful sunset. And the following day, we then did our first proper walk, which was to the Quang Si waterfalls. And we drove for about an hour to a village called Ban Long Lao, and it was there where we started to get a real glimpse into the local life and culture. And you can see this is a typical style of architecture built with local bamboo and things like that to actually make their little huts that they live in. And here, just before I took this photo, we'd actually seen one of the ladies walking in from the field carrying a writhing snake that was on the back of a pitchfork. She then proceeded to go and put it into her kitchen area of her hut, and it was lying down by the cooking pot next to the fire, and it was about to be cooked, I guess, for lunch or for supper later on that day. We walked past a local school where, interestingly, they don't have enough teachers to go round. So they actually have the younger children come in for the morning, and then the older children come into school for afternoon lessons. So equally, the children don't have the opportunity to have full-time education. Further on that day, we approached the countryside around the Quang Si waterfalls, and there you can see a mix of paddy fields, some more typical villages, and then the picture bottom left of the screen is the very top of the waterfalls. The walk then takes us right down the side of the waterfalls, and I was there right at the end of wet season, which was October time. All our tours run through the dry season, but you can see that the water there was actually running right over the wooden steps that we walked down to the base of the waterfall. Here we are at the base of the waterfall, and then the next moment we were walking past the moon bear conservation place, where they had about 8 or 9 moon bears. These had been rescued for conservation purposes. Moon bear, you can see they have the crescent on their chest, and that's why they're called the moon bear. Later on that day, we joined some of the locals in a game of pétanque. Now, you may know that Laos and indeed Cambodia was part of the French colonies, and there are quite a few things that have actually been left over, such as pétanque, or game of boule. Other things that have been left over are croissants and baguettes for breakfast as well. So after about 3 nights in Luang Prabang, we then fly down to Pak Se, which is in the south of Laos. And before we did that, we walked through the local street market, where here you see lots of different bags of rice. Rice is very much their staple diet. And you will get used to eating rice if you go out to this particular part of Asia. They have it for breakfast, lunch and dinner. The breakfasts, we experience a mix of Asian breakfast and Western breakfast, but the food was all very beautifully prepared and very, very tasty as well. And all the different fruits and vegetables that are brought down from the local tribes into the town for them to sell. When we flew to Pak Se, we then went to the Wat Pho Temple, and this is a World Heritage Site. It was built around the 9th century, just slightly before the main Angkor period. The Wat Pho Temple itself is now in ruins, but it's located on the old Angkor Road, and if you can imagine, there was an old direct line that went from Wat Pho Temple in Laos right through to the area around Siem Reap and where the Angkor Park is now. This shot here was a group of student teachers who were having a day out in the temple, and I just thought it was just such a great shot to include. Further views of the temple, they have a lot of iconic symbols that are remnant from previous Buddhist and Hindu times. These elephant rocks the elephant itself is quite a holy animal, which is left over from the Hindu belief as well. Next up, we go to the Balawan Plateau, and this is a high plateau over 1,000 metres above sea level, where we're introduced to the coffee growing in Laos. And the owner of the coffee plantation takes us around and introduces us to the different types of coffee bean. So you've got Arabica, Robusta, and there's another one, the name escapes me right now. But we have a tour through the coffee growing area. We see the whole process, and we also walk through the local villages as well. This is the owner of the coffee plantation, just picking the coffee fruit, which will then turn into the beans. Again, one of the rural villages that we walk through, you can see that the style of architecture has the wooden stilts here, bearing in mind that in the wet season, even if they're not close to the river, it rains so heavily, the waters rise very, very quickly. And this area underneath their living quarters enables the water to rise without too much damage being done to their property, but incredibly basic accommodation. Our guests would actually stay in decent hotels. This is just an opportunity to get out to see how the locals really live. And underneath these, this empty bit here, we would see children sitting in the shade, we'd see animals, it's like our sheds and garages here in the UK. It's where we put all of our junk, where we haven't got anywhere else to store it. And this is the owner of the coffee plantation and one of our local guides. And then this is the jeep left over from the Vietnam War that they've now utilised in giving jeep tours in the area. The following day, we did a walk through the Jipian National Protected Area, which took us through rice fields and also up to the hilltop called Phu Asa. We also had a local guide who joined us for explanations of what the local plants and if they had medicinal purposes or not. And he actually flipped over a leaf, and on the underside of this leaf was a toad. And he then turned the toad over, and on the underside he was looking at the spots on its belly. So we said through our guide, what's he doing? And the local chap then said, I'm trying to work out what numbers to put on the lottery tonight, because apparently there's something in local culture and local belief that if you actually count the number of the spots on the inside of a toad's belly and put that number on the lottery, it works in Laos. Apparently this had worked for this gentleman the year before, where in Laos currency he'd won an extreme amount of money. It was probably about £20, but he was quite happy about that. You can see the kind of terrain that the walk goes through, so you're not on proper footpaths, it is through absolute jungle terrain. So you're walking over tree roots, and it's very hot, very humid as well. You're talking about 70% humidity. Temperatures never really increase over about 32 degrees because you are on the tropics, so it does actually stay constant right throughout the year. The only difference is whether it's wet or whether it's dry. And this is at the top of Phu Asa, looking down onto a Ramsar wetland area. Here, we weren't able to see them on that particular day, but there are elephants in this region as well. And this is one of the monuments, or one of the relics, and there's a saying that there was an ancient civilization that was at the top of the hill here, but nobody has actually ever found out whether this was the case or not. We then go down to our boat to take us across the Mekong, and we go across as foot passengers with the bags on the boat, and we then go across to the Don Coney Island, and this is in a region in the Mekong known as the 4,000 Islands, and at this point the river is 17 kilometres wide at its widest point. And we then go and stay on the island, Don Coney Island, for 2 nights. So that's our little boat with our bags on board. And then we approach our accommodation, which are floating bungalows right on the River Mekong. And we have the most incredible view from our balcony. So you open, if I go back to the last screen, you can see the balcony. This was our little accommodation here, balcony. You can also see there's no kind of gate. So when you go out onto your balcony, you could, if you wanted to, go for a swim directly in the Mekong. But the sunset was incredible. Interestingly, because the Mekong is a working river and we were staying in these floating bungalows, there were life jackets provided in the bungalows, but also every time a boat went past and you were lying in your bed, you could actually feel the wash of the boat going past. You did feel like you're on a boat yourself. Don Coney Island was quite interesting. We did a walk around to see what the island had to offer. You see there it was raining, so we were there in our kind of Gore-Tex waterproofs, which was making us sweat even more. And then our local guide had this very interesting poncho that was probably far more practical and just didn't make him quite as hot. But one of the things that we found was this old engine, and this was when the French were trying to get upstream along the Mekong to take goods through into the top part of the river. But around this region, they hadn't realised that the whole river was covered in rocks, waterfalls, so there was no way they were going to be able to get boats up that part of the river. So they actually built a railway that went across this particular island to avoid going round the waterfalls and the rocks. I think it lasted about 2 years before they realised that there was no way that they were actually going to make it that far north up the river. But incredibly beautiful, and it's because we were there at the wet season, the amount of water coming through the waterfalls was just immense. We did a walk to the Leafy waterfall for these views, mostly a flat walk, about 7.2 kilometres. And then walking back to the village for lunch, this quite took my eye. 2 typical ladies wearing the hats. One of them had their face completely covered, and I've subsequently learnt that they cover their faces for a number of different reasons. It could be for infection purposes, but a lot of it is because they don't like to get the sun at all. And it used to be a sign of nobility that the paler they were as an Asian lady, the higher up in the nobility chain they were. So they tended to cover their faces. Some water buffaloes, which were animals that we saw quite a lot of, enjoying a mud bath. And next, interestingly, on a walk in the afternoon, still on the Indochina island, we saw these young boys. It looked like they were just standing in the middle of the river, but they were actually standing on reed beds. And then these were fishing traps. So if you imagine our salmon leaps on some of our rivers here, at certain times of the year, the fish swim down them, and then at other times of the year, the fish swim up them. They turn the traps around so that the fish can get upstream to spawn. But then they actually use these devices to catch the fish as well. And this was a young man who just walked past us in a pair of flip-flops and then went to get over the trap to go to his own little fishing area to see how he was doing. So we then went off the island and back to the mainland, and our next port of call was a beautiful waterfall called the Kona Fafeng waterfall, which is apparently the largest waterfall in the world, not from a drop point of view, but from the actual width across the river. Just put in here a couple of slides of a typical hotel that you would stay in. This is now in Cambodia, so we crossed the border from Laos to Cambodia by road, so you're taken to the border point. Everything is done for you in terms of visas. If you depart Laos on a weekend, you have to pay an extra $2 exit visa because they charge more on a Saturday or Sunday. And then we're met at the other side. You walk through no man's land for about 100 yards or so, and then we're met on the other side by the Cambodian crew. And then they took us to our next hotel. So this is typical dark Khmer architecture, quite comfortable, but because it's dark in some of the places, we actually were struggling to read at night because it was so dark inside. But you can see the open-sided bit here, and indeed here in the dining area. It's to let the breeze, if there is any breeze, to let the breeze through to alleviate some of the humidity. This was a caldera, a volcanic lake from about 4,000 years ago. One of the walks took us around this lake the afternoon that we arrived in Cambodia, about 2.6 kilometres. But quite interesting, again, just to see where the locals go to spend their relaxation time. The next day, we went to a gem mine. Some of you might find a situation like this difficult to deal with. It's quite a humbling experience. These young men and boys were working in the most appalling conditions to extract any kind of precious gemstones that they could find in the soil. So you can see here that where these barrels are, they've got a length of rope, and then down the next slide actually shows you a hole, and down at the bottom of that hole, about 50 metres deep, was another young man in the bottom of that hole putting the soil into the buckets, which were then raised up to ground level. Then there was another 2 or 3 men sifting through the soil trying to find any kind of precious stone, and if they found a precious stone, they would then get paid for that, and they were just trying to make a living to support their families. But going back to that one, you can see that it's really closed in. They didn't backfill at all, so it was kind of a disaster waiting to happen. They had young kids running around. But again, this was just to show us how the locals live in this area. Another walk took us through some more local villages. Here you can see in the top right, the girl is actually getting water out of the village well. That was the only water source that they had. And going through, we actually visited, this was an animist village, and they have this belief that when somebody dies, they actually then go on to another life. And they build these wooden totem poles to commemorate their dead. And they have a wooden enclosed area, and they put things inside there that will then help this person in their next life. So we saw a TV and a bike, which is quite something. We then we travelled down to Kratie, which is still on the Mekong, and en route to Kratie we stopped at the Temple of 100 Columns, and inside we had the story of Buddha explained to us as a beautiful pictorial frieze that goes all around the inside of the temple, and our guide actually explained how Buddha came to being. And you'll see lots of these statues of Buddha everywhere you go in Laos, Cambodia. We then went out to Koh Trong Island, which was another island in the middle of the Mekong, and we spent one night there, and this was our mode of transport to get us across to the island. We arrived and we were met by a local man on a scooter who then took us to our hotel. And this was quite exciting. It was about a 10-minute ride on the back of a scooter, bags and all, and we settled into our accommodation and then went off on a walk around the island, where we saw all kinds of locals going about their daily life. The next morning, we set off on another boat trip, and we went in search of the rare Irrawaddy river dolphins. And we were very lucky. We saw heron, but we also saw the dolphin as well. And they kept jumping. There was a pod of about 8 dolphins. And this is included in the trip. And the guides know where the dolphins are. So they'll either go right out into the middle of the river or they'll stay close to shore. But you normally pretty much 99% guaranteed that you will actually see the dolphins. And then we come down to Siem Reap, where we spend the final 4 nights. I didn't actually have a chance to do this, but in the actual tour for the guests, you would go to Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. And also, those of you familiar with that period in history, Phnom Penh has the Killing Fields Museum, a commemoration, really, a memorial to all those who were killed during the genocide period of the Pol Pot regime. So people, if they want to, can go to the Killing Fields Museum. We'll make allowance for that. And then there's an internal flight down to Siem Reap. And the hotel that you stay in for the final 4 nights is very luxurious. All the staff are very, very attentive. And every time you come back from whatever you've been doing at the end of the day's activities, they'll be greeting you with a cold flannel so that you can kind of wipe your face and wash your hands. And then they'll say, "Welcome home," because the greeting is, in Laos it's Sabadi, and in Cambodia it's Chop Suor. So every time you see a person from Laos, Cambodia, you'll be doing a lot of this during the course of your trip. One of the real highlights for us on this trip was the fact that we included a number of activities which are giving local people an opportunity to actually improve their lives. On this particular occasion, we went to a circus, which was an acrobatic circus, and it was an hour-long performance in the evening, just on the outskirts of Siem Reap. And these young kids were basically living on the street before they were given an opportunity to have some training and to actually then go through this acrobatic school, and they ended up giving these performances every day. We have one full day exploring Angkor Park, which is home to Angkor Wat, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of people come to Cambodia. So you've got Angkor Wat itself, which is the largest religious monument in the world, and it was the ancient capital of the Khmer Empire, created in the 9th century by Jayavarman II, who actually declared himself the god king of the surrounding land. And during our day there, we visit Taprome, Angkor Thom, Bayon Temple, the Elephant Terrace, and Angkor Wat itself. So this is Taprome, and if you've ever seen the film Tomb Raider, this is actually known as the Tomb Raider tree. Tomb Raider starred Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft, and even to this day, Angelina Jolie remains one of the country's ambassadors. She is a champion of children's causes in Cambodia, and she's also done an awful lot to try and prevent accidents by landmines. They've done a lot of work in the last 20 so years to actually get rid of all the landmines that were left over from Pol Pot and from also the Vietnam War prior to that. Beautiful, beautiful architecture throughout the whole of Angkor Park, including these really eerie faces that are built into the rock face of the temple. And the face itself is supposed to be the all-seeing, all-knowing Bodhisattva personified by Jayavarman VII. This is the Bayon Temple at the heart of Angkor Thom. And if you're looking for wildlife on this tour, you won't see very much. You'll see water buffalo, and you will see the odd monkey down at Angkor Park. And then this is Angkor Wat itself, built in the 12th century by Suryavarman II, and it was dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. Also a World Heritage Site, and as I've previously said, this is one of the main reasons why people go to Cambodia. But obviously our tour covers a lot more than just Siem Reap itself. One of the other modes of transport is a tuk-tuk, and this is quite a good way of getting around in Siem Reap on your free time if you don't want to walk anywhere. A highlight for me, as well as Angkor Wat, was to actually go out to Tonle Sap, which is the largest inland freshwater lake in Southeast Asia. And it actually provides Cambodia with half its supply of fish annually. And there's a lot of houses on stilts and also some floating houses as well. So it's just some different scenes that you experience out on the lake. People going about their daily lives. And this was actually the school run. So just off the shot on the right-hand side was the local school, and these were all the local school children coming into school on boats. And there's none of the big four-wheel drives that parents drop the children off. There were no parents in sight. It was just the children who were rowing themselves to school. And again, this was the lunchtime period, so the young children had come in the morning, and the older children were then arriving to go to school in the afternoon. And this was the grocer shop doing its delivery. Then later on that afternoon, we went to another temple called Beng Melia Temple, which has pretty much been left as it was found. It's still on the same Angkor period. It was built around the mid-12th century. But when you're walking around this area, you do have a real sense of adventure and exploration. And as we were returning back to our hotel that evening, looking ahead of us out of the transport window, I saw this pig on the back of a scooter. And when I looked closely, there were in fact 3 pigs on the back of the scooter heading off to market. So the final full day was spent in the Kulin mountain range, which is believed to be a sacred mountain. They have a lot of locals go for weekends. There are religious monuments, elephant rocks, and stupas and Buddhist statues as well. And then we finished off that walk at another beautiful waterfall at the end of the day. I mentioned street food earlier on. This was a close-up shot of the street food, and this is a range of deep-fried crickets, locusts, mealworms. I think they had some battered frogs as well. And my husband, who came with me, was desperate to try a tarantula, but he only wanted a tarantula leg. He didn't want the whole thing. And fortunately or unfortunately for him, there weren't any tarantulas on sale that day, so he didn't get to sample one. But those are the things that if you have the inclination, the delicacies are there for you to try. And then finally, on the final evening, we went to a restaurant and we were entertained by these beautiful dancers, which was an Apsara dance. And Apsara dances is something that is part of their traditional culture. During the Pol Pot regime, all of this cultural stuff had to stop. It was banned completely. And it's only in the last 5 or 10 years, really, where the Cambodians are bringing back their culture and their history. And so this was just a chance to see the different type of dances that they used to do to tell their story throughout time. So that was a whirlwind tour of Laos, Cambodia. What I would say it's good for is total cultural immersion. You do get to experience the real life in both Laos and Cambodia. You go off the beaten track, and as previously mentioned, this particular tour supports a lot of NGO-supported organisations, such as the circus, and also we were eating in restaurants where the staff were also trained as a way of giving them an opportunity to better themselves. There's a huge focus on the River Mekong, and if you're into the history, particularly around the Angkor period, that is absolutely fascinating. If you don't like creepy crawlies, spiders and things like that, I wouldn't recommend this as a destination for you. If you want to do walking for walking's sake, and you want to do 10-12 miles each day, then that's not for you either. And if you want to do a lot of wildlife spotting, that's not for you. But the one thing I would say is that I felt so incredibly privileged to be able to go and visit Laos, Cambodia, and all the locals are just so friendly. They actually said to us, thank you for coming to our country because we can't afford to come to yours. And finally, if you were sitting at the front of the theatre here, I have put on a little leaflet where if you do book with us, you'll get £50 off your first booking. We have tours going out to Laos, Cambodia. We've got one, the first one goes out in a couple of weeks, and then we've got one in March and one in November as well. So, any questions? Sorry?
What's the size of the group?
The size of the group is about 14 people, plus HF leader and local guides as well, so it's a really small group. There is a single supplement. I haven't got it to hand, but yes, there is one, yes. Yes, all the excursions are included. So the boat trip to see the Irrawaddy dolphins, that's all included. All the walks are included. The entrance to Angkor Wat, to Wat Phu, it's all included. Yeah. Temperatures are approximately between 28 and 30 degrees, which stay constant, but there is a high level of humidity as well. Not really. The temperatures are pretty static throughout the year because you're right on the tropics. It's just the level of humidity that varies. Yeah. Okay, when the dinners aren't included, the local guide and the HF leader will actually arrange a restaurant for you, or you can go out and explore on your own. You do need visas, and you can buy visas on arrival. You don't have to actually get them in advance. But you will need, I think it's 2 passport photos for each country, and then an amount of US dollars. The currencies that you can use in both Laos and Cambodia, US dollars is better than pound sterling.
So the cost of visas is not included?
The cost of visas is not included in the price of the holiday. No, that's something extra. Okay, thank you very much.